Elena clutched her little sister's hand as they walked down another empty street. At 24, she never thought she'd be responsible for keeping a 6-year-old alive with no home and no money. Their mother had died last winter, leaving them with nothing but each other and a few belongings they'd long since pawned or lost. "I'm hungry," Lila whispered, her small voice almost lost in the evening traffic noise. "I know, sweetie. We'll find something soon." Elena squeezed her sister's hand, trying to ignore the gnawing in her own stomach. They hadn't eaten properly in 3 days, just scraps from dumpsters behind restaurants and half-finished sandwiches left on park benches. Rain started to fall, and Elena pulled Lila under the awning of a small diner. Through the window, she could see families eating dinner, waitresses carrying plates piled with food, and the warm glow of normalcy that felt like it belonged to another world entirely. Lila pressed her face against the glass, her breath fogging a small circle. "Can we go in?" she asked. Elena felt the familiar weight of shame settle in her chest. "Not today. Maybe tomorrow." Every day was the same lie. Tomorrow never brought food or shelter or safety. Tomorrow just brought more hunger, more cold, and more of the crushing realization that she was failing the only person who mattered. A man stepped out of the diner, carrying a takeout bag. The smell of hamburgers and fries wafted toward them, and Elena's stomach clenched painfully. He was middle-aged, wearing an expensive-looking coat, his face kind but unremarkable. Without thinking, Elena stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cracking. "Could you spare anything? My sister hasn't eaten today." The man looked at them, really looked at them, in a way most people didn't. His eyes lingered on Lila's dirty face and Elena's thin frame. Instead of walking past or muttering an excuse, he held out the bag. "Take it," he said. "I can always order more." Elena reached for it, but stopped, a desperate thought forming. This man had money. He looked decent. And Lila needed more than just one meal. "I can't take care of her anymore," Elena blurted out, the words burning her throat. Would you please take her? Just for a while. Feed her. Keep her warm. I'll find a way to contact you later when I get back on my feet." The words hung in the air between them. Elena couldn't believe what she'd just said, but desperation had eaten away at her pride, her principles, everything that made her who she was. All that remained was the need to keep Lila alive, even if it meant giving her up. The man, Adrian was his name, though Elena wouldn't learn this until later, stared at her in shock. "Are you serious?" Elena nodded, unable to speak again. She knelt down to Lila's level, brushing hair from her forehead. "This nice man is going to take care of you for a little while. I need to find us a place to stay, and I can't do that with you getting sick in the rain." "Okay." Lila looked confused but didn't cry. She was used to doing what Elena told her, used to the constant adjustments of their precarious life. "Will you come back soon?" "As soon as I can." Elena hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her hair, trying to memorize the feel of her small body. Then she stood up, grabbed the takeout bag, and walked away quickly before she could change her mind. She didn't know the man she'd left Lila with was Adrian Holt, who ran a foundation for homeless families. She didn't know he had lost his own sister to drugs and poverty years ago. She didn't know he would stay up all night, watching Lila sleep in his guest room, wondering about the young woman who had made such an impossible choice. Elena found a dry spot behind a department store, huddled against the wall, and opened the bag of food. The first bite made her dizzy with relief, but by the second, she was sobbing. The food turned to ash in her mouth as the reality of what she'd done crashed over her. She had given away her sister, her only family, the one person she had promised to always protect. She told herself it was temporary. She would find a job tomorrow. She would find a shelter that would take them both. She would go back to that diner and wait for the man to return Lila to her. But as rain soaked through her shoes and the night grew colder, Elena couldn't escape the knowledge that she had crossed a line she never thought she would. She had broken a promise to her mother, to Lila, to herself. And she had no idea how to make it right. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by dreams of Lila calling for her. When morning finally broke, Elena was already walking back toward the diner, rehearsing what she would say when she saw the man again. She would thank him. She would take Lila back. She would find another way. She had to believe there was another way. Adrian stood in his kitchen, watching Lila eat cereal at his counter. She swung her legs back and forth, too short to reach the floor from the high stool. Last night felt surreal now in the morning light. He still couldn't believe a young woman had handed her sister to him, a complete stranger, out of sheer desperation. "Is your sister sick?" he asked gently. Lila shook her head, milk dribbling down her chin. "She's just tired. And sad. She cries at night when she thinks I'm sleeping." Adrian nodded, processing this. He hadn't called the authorities yet, though he knew he probably should. Something about the raw panic in the young woman's eyes had stopped him. This wasn't a case of abandonment. It was a breaking point. "Do you and your sister stay in a shelter?" He tried again. "Sometimes. But Elena says the people there take kids away, so we can't stay long." She said this matter-of-factly, like it was normal to live in fear of separation. Adrian had seen this before through his foundation work. Families avoiding the system because they feared being torn apart. Foster care was a last resort for many, especially older siblings caring for younger ones. "What's your sister's full name?" "Elena Reyes." "I'm Lila Reyes." She pronounced it with a slight accent, the way her sister must have taught her. "Mom said we're named after our grandmas." Adrian wrote down the names. "And how old is Elena?" 24. "She had a birthday last month, but we didn't have cake." As Lila finished breakfast, Adrian showed her to the living room where she could watch TV, something that clearly delighted her. While she was distracted, he made some calls. His foundation had connections with most of the shelters and social services in the city. Someone must have encountered the Reyes sisters before. By afternoon, he had a lead. A women's shelter downtown had recently helped a young woman matching Elena's description. The director remembered her because she'd been particularly worried about keeping her sister with her. Adrian arranged to visit the next day, but didn't mention finding Lila. He needed to understand the situation better first. That evening, he took Lila shopping for clean clothes and a few toys. She was quiet in the store, eyes wide at all the options. When he told her to pick whatever she wanted, she hesitated, only choosing the plainest, cheapest items. It broke something in him to see a child so careful, so aware of cost. "My sister says we can't have nice things because we move around too much," she explained when he asked why she put back a colorful backpack she'd been admiring. "You don't have to worry about that right now," Adrian said. He added the backpack to their cart. Back at his house, he ran a bath for her, finding himself surprisingly comfortable with the caretaking role. He'd never had children of his own. His work had always come first, but there was something familiar about helping Lila. Perhaps it was because she reminded him of his sister Jenny, who died 10 years ago after years of struggling with addiction and homelessness. As he tucked Lila into bed that night, she asked the question he'd been dreading. "When is Elena coming back?" Adrian sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm going to help find her tomorrow. I promise." "She always comes back," Lila said with absolute certainty. "Even when she has to leave me somewhere safe. She always finds me again." This wasn't the first time, then. Adrian wondered how many safe places Lila had been left in before. He stayed until she fell asleep, her small hand clutching the edge of the blanket. The next morning, Adrian called his assistant to clear his schedule and arranged for his housekeeper to watch Lila while he visited the shelter. Before leaving, he knelt down to Lila's level. "I need you to stay here with Mrs. Collins while I go look for Elena. Is that okay?" Lila nodded solemnly. "Will you tell her I'm being good? So she won't worry." "I will," Adrian promised, his throat tight. The shelter was in a converted school building downtown. The director, a no-nonsense woman named Diane, met him in the lobby. She recognized him immediately. His foundation had funded their renovation last year. "Elena Reyes," Diane confirmed when he asked. "Yes, she stayed with us for about 2 weeks last month. Sweet girl, very protective of her little sister." She frowned. "Are you saying she left the child with you?" Adrian explained the encounter, watching Diane's face shift from shock to understanding. "She wouldn't be the first," Diane said quietly. "Sometimes they reach a breaking point. Can't feed their kids, can't keep them warm. They make impossible choices. Do you know where she might be now?" Diane shook her head. "She left suddenly one night. Said someone at the park told her they were doing family separations here." She sighed. It wasn't true, of course, but these rumors spread like wildfire among the homeless community. Adrian left with a list of other shelters and locations where Elena might go. For the next week, he visited each one, showing Elena's picture, which he'd carefully cropped from a photo he'd taken of Lila holding a drawing of her family. Meanwhile, Lila settled into a routine at his house. She helped Mrs. Collins water plants and fold laundry. She drew pictures of Elena and their mother. She never complained, never threw tantrums, never acted like the 6-year-old child she was. Her patience terrified Adrian more than any tears would have. On the 8th day, he got a call from a soup kitchen volunteer. "There's a young woman here who matches your description. She's been coming in for dinner every night, always asking if anyone's seen a little girl named Lila." Adrian drove there immediately. He spotted her as soon as he walked in. Thin, dark hair pulled back, eyes constantly scanning the room. She was sitting alone at a corner table, picking at a bowl of stew. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Elena." She looked up, confusion crossing her face, then recognition. She stood so quickly she knocked over her water glass. "Where's Lila? Is she okay? Please tell me she's okay." The words tumbled out, panicked and breathless. "She's fine," Adrian assured her quickly. "She's safe. She's at my home." Elena's legs seemed to give out, and she sank back into her chair. "Thank God. I've been looking everywhere. I went back to the diner, but you weren't there, and no one knew who you were." "I should have left my information," Adrian said, sitting across from her. "I'm sorry." Elena shook her head, tears forming. "No, I'm the one who should be sorry. I can't believe I did that. I couldn't." She broke off, unable to continue. "You were trying to keep her safe?" Adrian said gently. "Lila understands that. She told me you always come back for her." Elena wiped her eyes. "Can I see her? Please." "Right now," Adrian promised. "I'll take you to her right now." The car ride to Adrian's house was silent. Elena sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She couldn't bring herself to look at Adrian, shame burning through her every time she remembered their first meeting. "She talks about you constantly," Adrian said, breaking the silence. "Every night before bed. She tells me another story about you. How you make up songs to help her fall asleep. How you always give her the bigger half of whatever food you find." Elena stared out the window, watching unfamiliar neighborhoods pass by. "I had no right to leave her with you." "You had every right to seek help," Adrian countered. "That's what parents do. They find ways to keep their children safe, even when it costs them everything." "I'm not her parent. I'm just her sister." "You're both," Adrian said simply. They pulled into a driveway of a house that made Elena's breath catch. It wasn't a mansion, but it was big, 2 stories, neat garden, porch swing. The kind of house she and Lila would peer into during their wanderings, imagining the lives of the people inside. "You live here?" she asked, suddenly feeling even more out of place in her dirty clothes. Adrian nodded. "It's too big for just me, honestly." Before he could say more, the front door flew open and Lila burst out, running down the path. Elena barely had time to step out of the car before her sister slammed into her, small arms wrapping around her waist with surprising strength. "You came back. I knew you would. I told Mr. Adrian you always come back." Elena knelt down, hugging Lila properly, pressing her face into her sister's hair. She smelled different, like shampoo and clean clothes in someone else's home. "I'm so sorry," Elena whispered. "It's okay. Mr. Adrian has a TV and a bathtub, and he let me have strawberry ice cream after dinner." Lila pulled back, her face serious. "But I missed you a lot." Elena looked up to see Adrian watching them from a distance, giving them space. A woman stood on the porch behind him, older, with silver hair and a kind face. Mrs. Collins, Elena would later learn, who had been keeping Lila company while Adrian searched. "Why don't we go inside?" Adrian suggested. Mrs. Collins made lunch. Lila grabbed Elena's hand, tugging her toward the house. "You have to see my room. It has a real bed with puffy pillows and everything." The inside of the house was just as nice as Elena had imagined. Clean, warm, filled with books and comfortable furniture. Not fancy or showy, just secure. The kind of place where bad things didn't happen. Lunch was awkward. Elena barely ate, too aware of her dirty fingernails, her unwashed hair, the stark contrast between herself and the clean, orderly world around her. Lila chattered happily, oblivious to the tension, telling Elena about everything she'd done in the past week. After lunch, Adrian showed them to a bathroom where Elena could shower. He left fresh towels and a set of clothes, new, with tags still on them. "I guessed on the size," he said apologetically. "There's a toothbrush and other things in the cabinet." Elena waited until he closed the door before bursting into tears. She cried under the shower, letting the hot water, actual hot water, wash away days of grime and fear. She cried as she brushed her teeth, as she combed her wet hair, as she put on clean clothes that fit perfectly. When she emerged, Lila was waiting in the hallway. "You look pretty," her sister said, taking her hand. "Like before Mom died." Adrian was in the living room, talking quietly on the phone. He hung up when he saw them. "Feeling better?" Elena nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "Thank you. For everything. For taking care of Lila. For finding me." She took a deep breath. "We should probably go now." Adrian frowned. "Go where?" "I don't know. But we can't stay here. We've already taken enough of your charity." "It's not charity," Adrian said firmly. "And you don't have anywhere to go. At least stay the night, get some proper rest." Elena hesitated. Every instinct told her not to accept more help, not to owe this man anything else. But Lila was looking up at her hopefully, and the thought of dragging her back to the streets, back to hunger and cold and fear, was unbearable. "Just tonight," she agreed reluctantly. One night turned into 2, then 3. Adrian never pressured them to leave. Instead, he helped Elena apply for assistance programs she didn't know existed. He connected her with a social worker who specialized in family preservation. He found a doctor who examined both sisters free of charge, prescribing vitamins for Lila's slight anemia and antibiotics for Elena's persistent cough. On the 4th day, Elena found Adrian in his home office, working on his laptop. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked from the doorway. Adrian looked up, considering her question. "I run a foundation for homeless families. It's what I do. But this is different. This is personal. You took us into your home." Adrian closed his laptop. "My sister Jenny died on the streets 10 years ago. Drug addiction, mental health issues. I tried to help, but she wouldn't accept it. She was afraid I'd take her daughter away from her." He paused. By the time she was ready for help, it was too late. "I'm sorry," Elena said quietly. "When you approached me that night, I saw someone making an impossible choice out of love, not neglect. I saw someone I could actually help." He smiled slightly. "And Lila reminds me of my niece. She's in college now, living with my parents." Elena nodded, understanding now. She wasn't just a charity case to him. She was a reminder, a second chance. "I don't want to be someone's redemption project," she said carefully. "Good, because that's not what this is," Adrian replied. "This is one human being helping another, with no strings attached. You can leave anytime. My door will still be open if you need to come back." Later that night, after Lila was asleep, Elena sat on the guest room bed, thinking about Adrian's words. She'd spent years not trusting anyone, convinced that help always came with conditions. But maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong. She took out the brochures the social worker had given her: housing assistance, job training, childcare vouchers. Resources that could help her build a stable life for Lila. It wouldn't be easy. There would be waiting lists and paperwork and probably disappointments. But for the first time in years, there was a path forward that didn't involve just surviving day to day. Elena looked at her sister sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling, her face relaxed. She deserved so much more than Elena had been able to give her. And maybe now, with help, Elena could finally become the person Lila needed her to be. Not just a sister trying her best, but someone who could provide security, stability, a real home. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered, brushing hair from Lila's forehead. "I promise." 2 weeks turned into a month. Elena found a part-time job at a cafe near Adrian's house, working morning shifts while Lila was at a small daycare program. The owner, Maria, had hired her despite her lack of experience and references, something Elena suspected had to do with Adrian's influence, though he denied making any calls. "I just happened to mention you were looking for work," he said when she confronted him about it. Maria makes her own decisions. Regardless of how she got the job, Elena threw herself into it. She arrived early, stayed late, and learned everything she could. Having an income, even a small one, restored something in her that had been missing for years, a sense of control, of contribution. She and Lila were still staying in Adrian's guest rooms. Elena had tried to leave twice, looking at small apartments she might be able to afford with her cafe wages. But the security deposits were impossible, and when she mentioned moving to a women's shelter until she saved enough, Adrian had looked so genuinely hurt that she dropped the subject. "There's no rush," he told her. "Having you and Lila here makes this place feel like a home again." It was true that his house had changed since they arrived. Lila's drawings covered the refrigerator. The formal dining room was now used for actual meals instead of just being a showpiece. Even Mrs. Collins seemed happier, taking special pride in teaching Lila how to bake cookies and fold napkins into fancy shapes. One evening, as Elena was setting the table for dinner, Adrian approached with an envelope. "I've been working on something," he said, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "It's up to you if you want to pursue it, but I thought you should know it's an option." Inside the envelope were forms for a small business loan through his foundation, along with a rental agreement for a storefront a few blocks from the cafe where she worked. "Maria mentioned you've been experimenting with recipes in the kitchen. She says you have a natural talent." Adrian watched her face carefully. The space would work as a small bakery. The loan covers renovations and equipment. Low interest, flexible repayment terms. Elena stared at the papers, speechless. She had been playing around with baking, creating simple pastries that Maria had started selling at the cafe. Customers had responded well, some even placing special orders. But this, a bakery of her own, was beyond anything she dared to imagine. "I can't accept this," she said finally. "It's too much." "It's not a gift," Adrian said firmly. "It's an investment. The foundation does this all the time, provides startup capital to people with potential." He smiled. "Though I admit, not all our investments make pastries that taste like yours." Elena couldn't help but laugh. "I've never run a business. I didn't even finish high school. That's what the small business development program is for. You'd have mentors, classes, but only if you want it," Adrian added quickly. "There's no pressure. The application is already filled out, but you don't have to sign it." That night after Lila was asleep, Elena sat on her bed looking at the forms. The Elena from a few months ago would have seen this as a trap, an obligation she could never repay. But the Elena who had been working and saving and slowly rebuilding her self-worth saw it differently. This wasn't charity, it was a chance. The next morning, she signed the application and left it on Adrian's desk. He found her later in the garden, helping Lila water flowers. "I'll submit this today," he said, holding up the envelope. "The committee meets next week, but I have to warn you. The chairperson can be pretty demanding." "You're the chairperson, aren't you?" Elena asked, smiling despite her nerves. Adrian winked at Lila, who giggled. "Guilty as charged." The loan was approved within days. Elena spent her mornings at the cafe and her afternoons at the empty storefront, planning layouts, testing recipes, and working with a contractor Adrian recommended. Lila came along after daycare, drawing pictures of what she thought the bakery should look like, always with herself and Elena front and center in her designs. "Will we live at the bakery?" Lila asked one day as they were measuring space for display cases. "No, sweetie. We'll find an apartment nearby," Elena explained. Lila's face fell. "But what about Mr. Adrian? Won't he be lonely?" Elena hadn't considered that. In all her planning for their future, she hadn't thought about what it would mean to leave Adrian's house. Not just for her and Lila, but for him. He'd grown attached to them, especially to Lila. The house that had once felt too big for him now fit the three of them perfectly. That evening, she broached the subject carefully. "I've been looking at apartments near the bakery." Adrian nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "That makes sense. The commute would be easier. Lila's worried about you being lonely." Adrian smiled slightly. "Lila's very perceptive. Would it be weird if we stayed a little longer? Just until the bakery is up and running. Then we'll definitely find our own place." The relief on Adrian's face was unmistakable. "You can stay as long as you need. Or want." As spring turned to summer, the bakery took shape. Elena named it Lila's Sweet Shop, with a logo based on one of her sister's drawings. The grand opening was scheduled for July, and as the day approached, Elena found herself both terrified and exhilarated. The night before the opening, she couldn't sleep. She wandered downstairs to the kitchen for tea and found Adrian already there, working on his laptop. "Pre-opening jitters?" he asked, closing his computer. Elena nodded, sitting across from him at the counter. "What if no one comes? What if they hate everything I make? What if I've wasted all your money and made a complete fool of myself? First, it's not my money, it's the foundation's. Second, Maria has been getting calls all week from customers asking when your bakery opens. And third," he reached across the counter to squeeze her hand. "You could never be a fool, Elena. You're one of the strongest, smartest people I've ever met." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't feel strong. I feel scared all the time." Being scared and being strong aren't mutually exclusive. Most brave people I know are terrified. Were you scared when you found me that night at the soup kitchen? Adrian thought for a moment. Yes, but not in the way you might think. I was scared you wouldn't trust me, that you'd run again with Lila, and I'd never know if you were both okay. Elena had never considered that. In her mind, Adrian had always been the one with all the power, all the resources. She hadn't realized he'd been just as invested in their well-being, just as worried about the outcome. I don't think I've ever properly thanked you, she said quietly. Not just for Lila and me, but for showing me that there are good people in the world. I'd forgotten that. You don't need to thank me, Adrian replied. Just promise me something. What? When you're in a position to help someone else someday, you'll do it. Elena smiled. I promise. The next morning, Elena arrived at the bakery at dawn to start baking. By the time she unlocked the front doors at 9 a.m., there was a small line waiting outside. Adrian and Lila stood at the back, giving her thumbs up as the first customers entered. By noon, they had sold out of almost everything. Elena was exhausted but happier than she'd been in years. This small shop, these recipes, this life she was building, it was all hers. Not given to her, but earned through her own work and courage. And as she watched Lila proudly showing customers around her bakery, Elena knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Not just the two of them, but with Adrian and the community they'd found. A family created by choice rather than blood. Fall came, bringing cooler temperatures and a steady rhythm to their lives. The bakery had been open for 3 months, and while it wasn't making Elena rich, it was supporting them. She had hired 2 part-time employees, both young mothers who needed flexible schedules, and was developing a loyal customer base who came as much for her warm smile as for her pastries. Lila had started first grade at the local elementary school. The transition hadn't been easy. Years of instability had left her behind academically, and she struggled to connect with other children. Her teacher suggested testing for learning disabilities, but Elena hesitated, afraid of labeling her sister. It's not a bad thing, Adrian said when Elena shared her concerns one evening. They were sitting on his back porch, watching Lila chase fireflies in the yard. Getting her the right support early could make all the difference. I know that logically, Elena admitted, but part of me feels like it's my fault. If I'd been able to give her a normal life from the beginning, maybe she wouldn't be struggling now. You can't change the past, but you can help shape her future. Elena agreed to the testing. The results showed Lila had a mild processing disorder, nothing that couldn't be addressed with some extra help. The school assigned her a tutor 3 days a week, and Elena spent evenings working with her on reading and math. Slowly, Lila began to catch up. Meanwhile, Elena was dealing with her own adjustment issues. Running a business was harder than she'd expected. There were taxes and regulations, inventory management, and marketing decisions. The business development program helped, but there were days when she felt completely overwhelmed. On one particularly difficult day, after a health inspector had cited the bakery for a minor violation, Elena locked herself in the bathroom and cried. When she finally emerged, her assistant Jessica was handling the front counter smoothly, and there was a text from Adrian. Bad days don't define you. They refine you. She hadn't told him about the inspection, which meant Jessica must have called him. Elena was surprised to find she wasn't angry about this. Instead, she felt supported, part of a network of people who cared about her success. As Christmas approached, Adrian suggested they take a weekend trip to a cabin in the mountains. Lila's never seen snow, he pointed out, and you haven't taken a day off since the bakery opened. Elena was reluctant to close the shop during the holiday season, but Jessica and the other assistant, Tara, insisted they could handle a weekend without her. You've trained us well, Jessica said. Plus, it's just 2 days. What could go wrong? The cabin was small but cozy, with a fireplace and a view of snow-covered pines. Lila was ecstatic, running from window to stare at the falling snow, then begging to go outside and build a snowman. Adrian produced hats, gloves, and boots for everyone. I came prepared, he explained when Elena raised an eyebrow at the perfectly sized children's snow gear. That evening, after Lila had exhausted herself playing in the snow and fallen asleep on the couch, Elena and Adrian sat by the fire, talking quietly. I've been thinking, Elena said hesitantly. It's been almost a year since that night at the diner. Adrian nodded. A lot has changed. Lila and I should probably find our own place soon. We've imposed on you long enough. Adrian was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. You're not imposing, but I understand if you want your own space. It's not that, Elena said quickly. Your house feels like home now. I just don't want to take advantage of your generosity. Can I be honest? Adrian set down his mug of hot chocolate. Having you and Lila there has changed my life. Before, I was just existing, working, coming home to an empty house, repeating the cycle. Now I have someone to talk to at the end of the day. Someone who notices when I skip lunch or work too late. He smiled. And a 6-year-old who insists I read her the same bedtime story every night, complete with different voices for each character. Elena laughed. She's very particular about those voices. My point is, you've given me as much as I've given you. Maybe more. He looked at her directly. But if you want independence, I understand. There's actually a small apartment above the bakery that could be renovated. It would be yours, not the foundation's. Elena considered this. The idea of having their own place appealed to her. A space that was truly theirs, where they could establish their own routines and traditions. But she also couldn't imagine not seeing Adrian every day, not having his steady presence in their lives. Let me think about it, she said finally. When they returned from the mountains, Elena found the bakery not just surviving in her absence, but thriving. Jessica and Tara had handled a rush of pre-holiday orders and even implemented a new system for tracking special requests that was more efficient than Elena's method. You've built something real here, Adrian observed as they watched the Sunday afternoon crowd from the corner of the bakery. Something that can function without you constantly holding it together. Elena realized he was right. The bakery wasn't just her personal project anymore. It was becoming a community fixture, a place where people gathered and connected. Regular customers knew Lila by name, saving the corner table for her after school so she could do homework while Elena worked. Elderly neighbors stopped by daily for coffee and conversation. A local book club had started meeting there monthly. As winter turned to spring, Elena made a decision. She would stay at Adrian's house, not as a guest or a charity case, but as family. She would contribute financially, taking over some household expenses. And she would convert the space above the bakery into a small office and storage area instead of an apartment. Are you sure? Adrian asked when she told him. I don't want you to feel obligated to stay. I'm sure, Elena said firmly. Lila is happy and settled. The bakery is doing well. And she hesitated, then pushed forward. We care about you. You're part of our family now. Adrian smiled, his eyes suspiciously bright. I feel the same way. That spring, they established new routines. Adrian joined the school's mentor program, working with kids who needed positive male role models. Elena expanded the bakery's offerings to include lunch items and catering for small events. Lila continued with her tutor, making steady progress, her confidence growing. There were still hard days. Elena sometimes had nightmares about those desperate months on the streets. Lila occasionally had meltdowns when changes in routine triggered old fears of abandonment. Adrian worked too much, falling back into workaholic habits when stressed. But they faced these challenges together, supporting each other through rough patches. They celebrated small victories, Lila reading a whole book by herself, Elena being featured in a local magazine as a promising new business owner. Adrian taking his first real vacation in years when they all spent a week at the beach that summer. On the anniversary of the night at the diner, Elena closed the bakery early and made a special dinner at home. As they ate, she raised her glass in a toast to impossible choices that somehow lead to exactly where you're supposed to be. Adrian raised his glass, adding, and to the family we choose. Lila, not to be left out, raised her milk glass high, and to cake for dessert. They all laughed, the sound filling the dining room that had once been so formal and empty. Elena looked around the table at her sister's bright face and Adrian's kind eyes, and felt a sense of peace settle over her. They had all been broken in different ways, all searching for something they couldn't quite name. And somehow, against all odds, they had found it in each other. 5 years passed, each season bringing its own changes and growth. Lila was 11 now, her once thin frame filled out, her quiet nature blossoming into quiet confidence. She still struggled with some subjects at school, but her artistic talents had been discovered by an observant art teacher who had taken her under her wing. The walls of her bedroom were covered with paintings and sketches, each one showing increasing skill. The bakery had expanded into the space next door, now offering a full cafe menu and employing 8 people, including 2 former homeless women whom Elena had specifically sought out to train. Lila's Sweet Shop had become a neighborhood institution, hosting community events and donating leftover food to the same shelter where Elena had once sought refuge. Adrian had scaled back his work hours at the foundation, passing more responsibility to his capable staff. He discovered, somewhat to his surprise, that the organization ran perfectly well without his constant oversight. This gave him time to volunteer at Lila's school and help Elena with the business aspects of the bakery. The 3 of them had settled into a comfortable routine, their lives intertwined in a way none of them had planned but all of them cherished. One evening in early summer, Elena found Adrian in the backyard, setting up a table under the oak tree. Candles and mason jars cast a warm glow as the sun began to set. "What's all this?" she asked, helping him arrange plates and glasses. "I thought we could have dinner out here tonight. It's too nice to be inside." Elena raised an eyebrow. Adrian was a creature of habit who preferred eating at the kitchen island unless it was a special occasion. "What are we celebrating?" "Nothing specific. Just felt like a good night for something different." He looked uncharacteristically nervous, which made Elena suspicious. Lila appeared from the kitchen, carrying a basket of bread. "I helped Mrs. Collins make garlic knots," she announced proudly, "and she's letting me decorate the dessert." Dinner was Adrian's specialty: grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and a salad with homemade dressing. They ate slowly, talking about their day, laughing at Lila's animated retelling of a classroom drama involving an escaped classroom hamster and an overzealous janitor. After the plates were cleared, Lila ran inside to help Mrs. Collins with dessert. Adrian turned to Elena, taking her hand across the table. "I've been wanting to talk to you about something," he began. Elena felt a flutter of anxiety. After all these years, she still sometimes expected bad news, still prepared herself for the moment when everything good would be taken away. "I've been thinking about us, this arrangement we have," Adrian continued. "It's worked well, but I wonder if maybe it's time for a change." Elena's heart sank. He wanted them to move out. She'd always known this might happen eventually. Adrian was only in his 40s. He might want to date, maybe even start his own family someday. "I understand," she said quickly, trying to hide her disappointment. "Lila and I have overstayed our welcome. We can start looking for a place." "What?" "No." Adrian looked genuinely shocked. "That's not what I meant at all." He took a deep breath. "I'm saying this all wrong. What I meant was, I'd like us to make this arrangement more official." "Official?" "Elena, you and Lila are the most important people in my life. We've been living as a family for years now, but legally, we're just roommates." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I'm not asking for a romantic relationship. I'm asking if you'd consider a different kind of partnership, a commitment to continue building this life together, to make decisions together, to be Lila's parents together in the eyes of the law as well as in practice." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring. "This isn't an engagement ring in the traditional sense. It's a promise that I'll always be there for you and Lila, that we'll face whatever comes next as a team." Elena stared at the ring, then at Adrian's face, earnest and hopeful in the candlelight. This wasn't at all what she'd expected. Yet somehow, it made perfect sense. Their relationship had never followed a conventional path, had never fit into neat categories. Why should this next step be any different? "Are you asking to adopt Lila?" she asked, wanting to be clear. "Only if you both want that. I'm asking to formalize our family, however that looks. We could get married, if that feels right. Or we could create a different kind of legal arrangement. The important thing is that we'd be choosing this, intentionally, instead of just letting it evolve." Before Elena could respond, Lila burst back into the yard, carrying a cake decorated with somewhat lopsided frosting flowers. "Surprise!" she exclaimed, placing it carefully on the table. Then she noticed the ring box and gasped. "Is that for Elena? Are you giving her a present?" Adrian looked at Elena, waiting for her cue on how to handle this moment. "Adrian is asking us a very important question," Elena said slowly. "He wants to know if we want to be a real family, legally, officially, not just living together." Lila's eyes widened. "Like adoption? You'd be my dad." Adrian nodded. "If that's what you and your sister want." "Yes." Lila didn't hesitate. "I already tell kids at school you're my dad anyway." This was news to both adults, who exchanged surprised glances. "Lila, Why don't you go help Mrs. Collins with the coffee? Elena suggested. Adrian and I need to talk a bit more. When Lila had bounced back to the house, Elena turned to Adrian. This is a big step. I know, and we don't have to decide tonight. I just wanted you to know what I've been thinking. He closed the ring box. Whatever you decide, nothing has to change if you don't want it to. Elena considered his words carefully. 5 years ago, she would have seen this offer as a trap, or at best, charity. But now she understood Adrian better. He wasn't trying to save her or fix her. He was acknowledging what they had already built together. A family based on mutual respect and genuine care, not obligation or pity. I think, she said slowly, that I'd like some time to think about it. Not because I don't care about you, but because I want to be sure we're doing this for the right reasons. Adrian nodded, relief evident on his face. That's all I ask. Over the next few weeks, Elena thought about Adrian's proposal constantly. She discussed it with Jessica, who had become a close friend as well as an employee. She talked to Lila's therapist about how such a change might affect her sister. She even visited Ruth, the retired nurse from the shelter who had first encouraged her to accept Adrian's help, now living in a senior community across town. What are you afraid of? Ruth asked when Elena explained her hesitation. That I'm still taking advantage of him, somehow. That he feels responsible for us, obligated. Ruth shook her head. That man loves you and Lila. Not out of obligation, out of choice. Some families are born, others are built. Yours was built, brick by brick, through hard times and good ones. Elena knew Ruth was right. What she and Adrian had created together wasn't conventional, but it was real and strong and good. The legal details, whether they chose marriage, adoption, or some other arrangement, were less important than the commitment they'd already made to each other through their actions. On a warm evening in July, Elena asked Adrian to take a walk with her after dinner. They strolled through the neighborhood as the sun set, talking about everyday things. Lila's upcoming art camp, plans for the bakery's 5th anniversary celebration, a new recipe Elena was developing. When they reached the small park where Lila liked to feed ducks, Elena stopped and turned to Adrian. I've been thinking about your proposal, she said, and I've decided that I'd like us to formalize our family. I don't know exactly what that looks like legally, but I know that you, me, and Lila belong together. Adrian's face broke into a smile. Are you sure? I'm sure. You've shown me what family really means, not blood or obligation, but choice. Every day, we choose each other. I want to make that official. They discussed options on the walk home, adoption papers for Lila, legal guardianship arrangements, maybe even marriage down the road if their relationship evolved that way. The details could be worked out with time. What mattered was the decision to move forward together, intentionally creating the family they all needed. When they told Lila the next morning, she was ecstatic, immediately planning a family ceremony complete with a dress code, formal but comfortable, and a menu. Cake, obviously, with ice cream. As Elena watched her sister excitedly making lists, she thought about how far they had come from that desperate night outside the diner. She had been broken then, willing to give up the person she loved most because she couldn't see another way. Now she understood that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was courage. And accepting help wasn't surrendering control, it was opening the door to possibilities she couldn't have imagined. 3 months later, they held a small ceremony in their backyard. It wasn't a wedding or an adoption proceeding. Those legal steps would come later, in courtrooms and government offices. This was something more personal, a celebration of the family they had built. Friends from the bakery, Lila's teachers, Adrian's colleagues, and even some regular customers gathered to witness their commitment to each other. Lila, dressed in a blue sundress she had picked out herself, read a poem she had written about what family meant to her. Adrian spoke about the night he met them, how that chance encounter had changed the course of all their lives. And Elena, who once had nothing but her sister and her determination, looked out at the gathering of people who had become part of their extended family and felt a sense of belonging she had never thought possible. 5 years ago, I made a choice born of desperation, she said, her voice steady and clear. Today, I'm making a choice born of love and certainty. We are choosing to be a family, not because we have to, but because we want to. Not because it's easy, but because it's worth every challenge. As she finished speaking, Lila slipped her hand into Elena's. Adrian stood on her other side, his presence as solid and reassuring as it had been from the beginning. Together, they faced their future, not perfect, not without struggles, but theirs to build, one day at a time.